Hello, Virgo. Thanks for being here. Okay, so Virgo, some things cannot be explained. And I want to begin there in that honest, slightly uncomfortable acknowledgement because what is coming through for this collective today sits precisely in that territory. The territory of the felt but not provable, the known but not demonstrable, the specific and maddening category of experience that the rational mind keeps trying to organize into something it can file and move on from, and that keeps refusing to be filed, that keeps returning, that keeps insisting on being felt, even when the feeling has no comfortable explanation. You know what I am talking about. You have known for a while the connection that does not behave like other connections. The person whose presence in your life has a quality that the ordinary vocabulary of attraction and compatibility and shared interests simply cannot account for. The feeling when you are with them, or when you think of them, or sometimes when they think of you across whatever distance currently separates you, that something is happening that is larger than either of you, older than either of you, and entirely beyond either of your control. Uh, Take what is yours today. What resonates, let it stay. What does not, release it gently. But for those of you who felt recognition rather than curiosity when I spoke those words, who felt the specific, slightly breathless quality of someone finally hearing language that fits what they have been living, this reading is entirely for you. What exists between you and this person is not ordinary. I want to say that with the full weight of the repetition in the title very, very, very strong, because Spirit is being emphatic today in a way that I trust and will not soften. Not ordinary in the way that most connections, however warm and genuine, are ordinary. Not the comfortable, well matched, this makes sense on paper kind of connection that produces a good relationship and a shared life and all the things that represent the best of ordinary love. Something else, something that produces those things and also something underneath them, something that runs at a frequency the daily life of the connection rides on top of without always registering directly. A depth that most relationships never touch. A quality of recognition between two souls that operates beneath the personality, beneath the history, beneath even the feeling itself, at the level where two things simply know each other. Not because they have learned each other, because they already did. Soft sigh. Let me speak about what a soul bond actually is, because this word gets used in ways that empty it of its genuine meaning and what I feel in the energy of this collective today deserves the real meaning rather than the inflated one. A soul bond is not simply intense attraction, not simply deep compatibility, not even simply the rare and beautiful experience of being genuinely known by another person. Those things can exist without a soul bond. What a soul bond adds, what the very, very, very strong quality of this particular connection carries that the ordinary versions do not, is the sense of something pre existing, of the connection having a reality that precedes the relationship, of two people encountering each other and finding in the encounter something that feels less like meeting and more like remembering. Have you felt that with this person? The remembering quality, the specific, slightly disorienting sense that the familiarity between you is disproportionate to the time you have known each other, that something about them, the way they think, the way they move, the specific texture of their presence is known to you in a way that the history of your relationship cannot fully account for. That is the bond making itself felt, not as metaphysics, as experience, as the lived, bodily, entirely real experience of two souls that have a relationship that exists at a level below the conscious mind's ability to track or explain. And what I feel in the energy of this collective today is that relationship, whatever its nature, whatever its history, across whatever span of experience the soul carries pressing up through the surface of the current connection with an insistence that is increasing rather than decreasing. It is getting stronger. The bond not weakening with time or distance or the complications of whatever the current chapter of this connection contains. Strengthening with the specific quality of something that was always going to intensify as the two of you moved closer to the full acknowledgement of what exists between you, as though the bond has its own momentum, its own direction, its own knowledge of where this is going, even when the people carrying it do not. Ah, now hear what this other person carries, because Spirit is bringing their experience of the bond through today, and it needs to reach you. I cannot explain what I feel when I am with you. That is the honest beginning of it. I have tried to myself in the private attempts to make sense of something that resists making sense. And the best I have been able to arrive at is that what I feel is too large for the containers that ordinary language provides. The word connection is too small. The word love, even love, feels like it is describing the surface of something whose depth it cannot fully represent. It is as though, and I know how this sounds, I know it risks sounding like the kind of thing people say when they are being dramatic rather than accurate. It is as though I have been looking for something my entire life without knowing I was looking for it, without being able to describe what it was, only knowing the shape of the absence it left. And then encountering you and recognizing, not with the mind, not as a conclusion arrived at through consideration, but in the immediate pre rational, this is simply true way that this was what the absence was, the absence of you, this specific quality that only you carry, this frequency that only you emit, this particular way of being in the world that reaches something in me that nothing and no one else has reached, not because nothing else was offered, but because what you reach is not something that can be reached by anything other than the exact thing that reaches it. And I do not know what to do with that. I have not known what to do with it since the moment I first felt it. because knowing something is this real and this rare and this entirely beyond the ordinary categories of experience does not come with an instruction manual, does not arrive with a clear sense of what the knowing requires. Only with the undeniable, increasingly insistent, nowhere to hide certainty that what exists between us is not something I can simply decide to feel less of, not something that will resolve into something more manageable if I give it enough time and enough distance, something that has its own direction, and its direction is toward you. Always toward you. Soft sigh. Oh, feel the weight of that, because that is not the language of someone experiencing an ordinary attraction or even an extraordinary one. That is the language of someone living inside a soul bond of someone for whom the experience of the connection has reached a depth that the ordinary vocabulary of feeling cannot contain, who is trying to describe something with words that were built for smaller things, and finding in the trying that the inadequacy of the words is itself a kind of evidence of how large the real thing is. Now, I want to speak about what this bond means for the practical, daily, this is my actual life dimension of your experience. Because soul bonds can sometimes be spoken about in ways that float above the practical, that become so focused on the spiritual and the cosmic dimension that the real human, what does this mean for my life dimension, gets left behind. And you deserve the practical truth alongside the spiritual one. The bond does not override the work. That is the first practical truth. Whatever the depth of what exists between you and this person, however strong the soul level recognition, however undeniable the sense of something pre existing and significant, the daily expression of that bond in a real human relationship still requires the things that all real human relationships require: honesty, communication, the willingness to be present in the difficulty as well as the beauty, the choice made repeatedly in the ordinary moments as well as the extraordinary ones to show up fully for something that deserves full showing up. The bond creates the potential, the work creates the reality. And both are present in the energy of this collective today, the soul level recognition and the human level responsibility of two people who have been given something extraordinary and are being asked by the very strength of it to rise to meet it. Ooh, the second practical truth is about resistance, because soul bonds of this strength tend to produce, in the people carrying them, a specific and understandable kind of resistance. The resistance of someone who feels something this large and is frightened by the size of it, who understands at some level that what they are in the presence of is not something that can be held at a comfortable distance indefinitely, that it will require everything. And the requiring of everything, however beautiful the thing requiring it, produces in most people at least a moment of wanting to step back, of reaching for the more manageable version, of trying to love at a size that feels survivable rather than at the full size the bond calls for. You may have experienced this in yourself, in the other person, in the specific pattern of approach and retreat that strong bonds often produce before both people have found the courage and the steadiness to remain present in the full depth of what is there. The resistance is not evidence against the bond, it is evidence of its size, of how seriously both people are registering what is at stake. And the third practical truth, the one I feel Spirit pressing most insistently for this collective today, is about timing. Soul bonds do not operate on the timeline we would choose for them. They operate on their own timeline, which is responsive not to our desire for resolution, but to the internal readiness of both people to meet each other at the depth the bond requires. And that readiness on both sides, through whatever process each person has been moving through, may be closer to alignment than it has been at any previous point. Something is shifting. In the readiness on both sides, moving toward a point of simultaneous arrival where both of you are finally, genuinely in the same place of readiness to meet the full depth of what exists between you without the retreat, without the managed distance, without the resistance that was never about the not wanting, but always about the not yet ready for the full size of the wanting. Soft sigh. The not yet is becoming now. Slowly, with the specific and unhurried quality of something that cannot be rushed without being damaged, that has to arrive at its own pace and in its own time. But moving unmistakably, undeniably, in the specific direction that very strong soul bonds always ultimately move toward full expression. Toward the moment when what exists at the soul level finds its complete and unmanaged expression in the human daily, this is our actual life dimension. That moment is approaching for both of you together with the full, gathered, finally ready quality of two souls that have been circling the full truth of what they are to each other and are now, slowly and then all at once, stopping the circling and simply arriving. Stay open for it, not with the anxious, grasping, when is this going to happen quality of someone who has been waiting too long and is losing patience with the timeline, with the grounded, trusting, I know what this is and I know where it is going quality of someone who has felt the bond, really felt it at the depth where it actually lives, and knows that what is real at that depth does not disappear, does not dissolve, does not prove itself to have been something smaller than it felt. It is exactly as large as it feels. Very, very, very strong. And it is moving both of you at whatever pace the readiness requires toward the full expression of everything it has always contained. Ooh, trust it. Trust what you feel. Trust the recognition that arrived before the explanation. Trust the bond, its reality, its direction, its knowledge of where this is going, even when the knowing is not yet fully available to the conscious mind. It knows, it has always known, and where it is leading you, both of you, together at the full depth of what you are to each other, is somewhere worth every moment of the arriving. If this reading found you today, if something here finally gave language to what you have been living without being able to name, stay close. Subscribe and come back, because the story of a very strong soul bond finding its full expression is one worth witnessing all the way through to its most complete and most luminous chapter. And the next reading will be there for every step of the arriving.